Everybody to the Parish Council meeting. As we always do, before we start on the agenda, because we have the benefit of our two PCSOs, Kate and Adam, we always let them give us their report first so that they can then go and get on with their constabulary duties, which, as we know, will never be done. Well, that's what they said. You'll be silent. So, who's going to report, or both of you?
I think Kate should stand up and give us a
True leadership, Adam.
That's cruel.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to apologise that we haven't been coming as regularly as we would like. As probably most of you know, we are in the middle of a neighbourhood policing review at the moment, which it is coming towards its end. We still aren't fully sure what is going to happen, whether we will still be here or not. But there are less of us that there were at Ashford, so out of what we're an establishment of about 4 or 5 now, because people have either moved on to other jobs or they've joined up as regulars. So we are covering larger areas at the moment, so we can only make meetings as and when we possibly can, and obviously if you need us to come and visit. Obviously there's lots been going on. Most of you are all aware of my community voice.
Yep.
And hope that you all sign up to it. It's just another tool that we have to highlight what's going on in areas, a bit of crime prevention, especially recently in regards to catalytic converters that have been stolen, and that's not just in the rural, it is the whole of Ashford and Maidstone and other divisions, so it's happening around. But what we do ask is, because obviously I've spoken to some people, these might be being stolen but people aren't reporting it, but then there's other people that are reporting it and are giving us information of there might have been a suspicious vehicle and a number plate in the area, so then that all adds up to intelligence. That we can do further digging. It's not that we're going to necessarily tell you everything that's going on, because sometimes we can't tell you everything. But unless we're getting that information, we can't try and put a stop to the crimes that are happening. Obviously there's little things that can be helped where these thefts are involved, where you're parking your cars. Is it in a well-lit area? If you've got a garage, are you putting it in the garage? It's just the sensible sort of bits. Are you underneath well-lit streets and bits? And I'm not going to say that it's going to necessarily stop it, but it's a little way of helping towards it. Obviously people are still worried about reporting things by 101. It takes longer. They are trying to work on that, and things are happening up at FCR to take on calls. We still say if it's an emergency, it's happening, you're scared, alarm, distress, that's a 999 call. Information is either 101 or on the Kent Police website via live chat. That is a lot quicker way of doing it, and that comes direct to us. So please use that. Any of your crime figures for your area, you can get those on the Kent Police website as well. There's various hotspot areas that we've been covering recently as a whole in Ashford, but they monitor if we're getting lots of calls to certain areas. They will look at that and then they will send us out to those hotspot areas. So unless we're not getting the calls, it's not going to class as a hotspot area. All right. Is there any concerns or worries that anyone has while I'm here? I might be able to answer it, I might not.
Has anybody been apprehended?
There have been in certain areas. I don't know whether they're the same ones that are linked to this area,
Yes.
but I think it's a
It's
big.
Yeah, it's not just county-wide, it's...
National pastime.
Yeah.
And they won't do it in an area that they're from, they'll go further afield. So it could be that someone's arrested up in the Midlands for incidents that happen down in Kent.
And if you get nicked for this sort of thing, what likely penalty?
It all depends on what evidence they have against that person, what crimes they can actually link them to, because obviously they might have a few catalytic converters in their car and they've been arrested for that, but they need to identify whose cars that come from, what offence is that related to, and it will all be down to obviously the Crown Prosecution Service and what the outcome of court. It could be various different things. It could be fines, it could be suspended sentence, it may even be a custodial if it's such an offence that requires it. It all depends.
And that wouldn't be down to us, that would be down to the courts to
Of course.
decide.
Yeah.
Does that fall into the category where the police can seize the vehicle, or is it not the right
Yeah,
sort?
it could be classed as used in crime, and yeah, it could be
So they
seized.
could
under-
lose the vehicle at least.
Yeah, I mean, we have what we call mission vehicles, which are vehicles that will usually be on false plates and be used by organised crime groups to commit many different offences, and it's passed around and with different plates on it every time. So, yeah, we normally do seize vehicles for that.
But obviously if we have a number plate that has been seen in the area, we can then do digging with ANPR. There is a lot more ANPR cameras out and about.
They've been added more recently.
Yeah,
it's hard to say.
absolutely, in different areas that we can use, and they're good images that we can get.
Presumably the answer is for the makers to make catalytic converters more adherent to the vehicle.
Yeah, and there are packs that you can get to do security markings on as well.
Yes.
So it seems to be certain makes that they're looking at, which tend to be some of the older cars, aren't
Yeah,
they?
older
Older
cars.
style cars, because they can make quite a bit of money from.
Yes.
And they can, looking at CCTV from previous offences,
It's
they're gone within a minute.
It's
They're
really
that
cool.
quick.
Goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they need to be a bit more adherent to the vehicle, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So does it generally come under organised crime then?
I would say yes to that question. Sometimes it may be at a lower level. It could be people from that area that are an opportunist thing, where they want to make a quick bit of money. But I would say usually it would fall under organised crime in some respect.
And why is it the older vehicles they go for?
It must be the type of materials that was used.
It's the metal.
And out of interest, obviously the people who do the stealing of them aren't the end of the food chain, so there must be people receiving somewhere down the line and extracting. I mean, there must be fewer of them, I would have thought, in the country than there are people out there nicking the stuff. One of the questions that often bubbles up is there must be. Why do we know where it's going, if you like? What are your thoughts on that?
It's very difficult because, like anything, if we arrest a drug dealer, for instance, that person is the bottom of the food chain, and we can deal with that person for that offence, but it takes a lot of behind-the-scenes intelligence gathering to find out, well, where did he get his drugs from, who is he selling on behalf, and that is something that wouldn't fall down to myself or Kate. That would fall down to the more expertise departments.
The NCA or something like that.
Yeah, and not just the NCA, but as well as we have departments within Kent Police that we don't often hear about ourselves because there's a lot of things that happen that we don't know about. But there is a lot of work that goes into trying to identify who the top people are, because ultimately that's who we want to arrest. You can arrest as many low-level drug dealers as you like, but you're not going to solve that issue because someone else will come along, won't they?
And in relation with the catalytic converters, there are often teams within Kent Police that will go and check on various scrap metal dealers and stuff, because obviously they have to hold books on where they've got all their scrap metal from. So they
Serial
get,
numbers, etc.
yeah, so the Rural Task Force team go out, our CPT go out, so various teams go out and check these on a regular basis as well. But quite a lot of it goes up north or in other areas of the county.
I think there's been quite a few more instances of speeding them through the village recently than I've heard from you.
Has that been reported to us?
No, I don't think so, but can I take one resolution?
Yes, of course.
There you are.
They go too fast to get the numbers, of course.
Well, obviously there is such things as community speed watch that I'm not sure does Wittersham have one?
No, but you have your mobile SIDs. You've got your SID units now, haven't you, that move around the village.
Yeah.
How many sites do you have?
Three.
Three.
Three sites, one suit.
4 sites.
But one site.
One
it
is,
goes.
yeah. So there are speed indicators within the village, and the parish can download the data to see when the times are that the speeding is happening, and obviously they can also tap in with us as and when we have got the resources to do it. If we know there is a problem, then we can look at doing some speed checks out here, because both of us are trained to do the speed guns, and it's not a case of just dishing out tickets. It's there as an awareness, because people won't know when we are out and about, to sort of make speed aware to people that they need to slow down in the village. So
Do you do it after dark?
no.
No.
Do you do it before school run?
We-
Because
we
that's the
do-
time when the speeding is happening.
We can do it any time where it's daylight, as long as we can identify a suitable location. It usually requires us to have a place where we can safely pull this person over. Depending on who we're doing it with, we have to do a risk assessment on each site. So
it can't be near a bend.
No, it can't be near a bend, and certainly obviously it wouldn't happen in this place, but if there was, we wouldn't be able to do it on a 70-mile-per-hour road or something like that. But yeah, we have to first of all think about our personal safety and the safety of our members of the public. So yeah, if we can identify a suitable location, we can do it any time during the day.
You were talking about the whatever it's called, my community
Voice.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think, and others here will probably be in the same position. We're getting a lot. They usually come through in your name, although I think someone else probably sends them.
If they're in my name, I
You
have
use
sent
it.
them.
Oh well, that's when you've been doing your working from home then.
I do
Or
it in the office as
or in
well.
the office. That's what you said earlier. Anyway, it's the fraud alarms that I think are very helpful.
Yeah.
I know that they get repetitive, and anyone who follows these things has seen them all before. But nevertheless,
Unfortunately,
there are
yeah.
a lot of every few days we get another alert that it's either the TV licensing or it's the the courier fraud, or it's this one or it's that one or the other. I think that's very good if people keep getting it. And today I did follow through to a link, I'm not sure where I got it from, which was one of your specialist officers being interviewed by a KCC person. It wasn't necessarily even Ashford.
Yeah.
And that one was on romance fraud. And I did watch the interview for about 5 or 6 minutes it was. And I thought it was quite well done, because it was very sort of low level. It was nothing flash about it. It was just saying, watch out for all these things.
And it
It's
is
good.
scary. It is scary because there is so much scams and frauds out there, and what we find going to see people, quite a lot of people are embarrassed to actually report it, that they've actually been sucked in by these people. And yeah, romance scams are heightened. I've been to a number of, and people have lost thousands.
We've seen people that have lost their life savings.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Where they've never actually met the person, but they've fallen in love with them over the internet or over the phone. And when you say, well, have you actually met them? Well, we were going to, but they cancelled last minute. But then they've asked for a bit more money and they've given it. And when people are lonely, I totally get it, because they've got companionship through someone over the internet. So, yeah, unfortunately there are a lot. Courier fraud, there have been a lot, probably highlighted, where people are pretending to be police officers and asking for money. And we've been to some of those, haven't we, where they tend to, a person tends to befriend, and sadly it is elderly people or people that are on their own. They befriend them over the phone, or they say, oh, your grandson is in custody in the Met or something. This is DC, whoever, to help us with our investigation. If you, so that we can catch the fraudsters, if you can get us £1,000, we'll send a police officer down to pick it up by a courier to pick it up, and that will help with our investigation. People do hand it over.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's quite easy to get fake police officer uniforms on the internet nowadays. So we always try and get people to ask for identification, either a warrant card or an ID. But these scams are very sophisticated, especially the ones that are happening over the internet. They're constantly changing, and we're constantly having to adapt the way that we deal with them and we investigate them. And you know, it's happened to me several times. We've been doing this job 6 years, and we'll go to a fraud call and it was something we've never heard of before, and we'll speak to our colleagues in fraud prevention and they've never heard of it before because it's a brand new one, and then we have to sort of look into that and say, right, how are they doing it, how can we stop it? It's very sophisticated.
Put the news out. Okay, does anyone else have things to ask or say? No? Well, you're very welcome to stay, but equally I understand if you want to go.
It's very busy out there today,
It's
but
not that
thank
it's
you.
not we want to go, it's more that we have to go.
Thank you very much for coming.
Hopefully you will see us again,
Good.
but we can't promise.
Rubbish you, yes, I understand.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. Right, okay, so we'll start with the formal agenda. Reasons for absence.
Councillor Collins, childcare.
Are we comfortable with that? It's childcare. Accepted, thank you. Declaration by members of any interests, pecuniary rather than pecuniary, in accordance with, etc., etc.
No.
I don't think I saw any, no. I don't have any applications, therefore, to remind everybody now that the meeting is being recorded for publication online on the YouTube channel. And now we'll adjourn the meeting for the public session. Now, I know that we've got two topics to talk about at this stage. We've got the bus shelter in the public session, and we've got an application for a dedicated parking space in Forge Meads. Does anyone else have things they want to raise during the public session? No. That's it? Something else as well, as well as the parking space? Oh, okay, right. Well, let's do the bus stop first, and then there's two for you. Yeah, okay. So we're talking about not the bus stop really, the bus shelter. Councillors have had a 4-page notice, a document really, a proposal and a plan that came from Greg and Kate sitting there. And we also had a couple of pages of previous history sent to us from Yvonne, which I think you also shared with Greg and Kate. Yeah.
Yes.
So perhaps the best thing to do is to start with Greg and Kate giving us a sort of synopsis of where they think we are going, without going through the whole document, but just to tell us where things are in your mind, and it also means that anyone who's listening to the recording at least has a few sentences to know what we're talking about.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I hope that people have had a chance to see what Kate and I produced by way of trying to move this along. And it really is follow-up from the discussion we had in December with council members. As you know, we're not alone in thinking the bus shelter needs attention, and quite soon. The photograph I took and put on the front of this document wasn't carefully aligned to make it look awful. It looks awful. And so obviously we all agree there are things that could happen to it. As we've said in this paper, we think there are two aspects to this. One is refurbishment of a piece of council infrastructure that needs to happen, which could just be part of ongoing refurbishment every year or whatever, but it is in a state. And the other is that it doesn't work very well as a bus shelter. It's dark, it's internal, you can't see the buses coming, and it gets used for all sorts of other things because it's quite inviting for some of those other things. And we think that it could be made to work a lot better as a bus shelter. One way, obviously, would be to simply remove it and put a better one there, but that's expensive and quite possibly not the best outcome. So what we've proposed in this document is a number of alterations to make it work better and a number of acts of repair that it needs. Would you like me to run through those, Jeremy, or are they clear in this document?
Well, if everyone has read it, then I think we don't need to go through
Maybe I
each
can answer
individual
questions
item. I think I certainly, and I'm sure others will also, have come up with a few sort of questions in my own mind, as it were. I've seen the sort of approach that you've also sketched out on the back, which is very helpful.
Yeah.
And I certainly understand the point that it doesn't work very well, as you say, right up at the front, because it really is set back too far. The hedge is higher than you really need it. Even if you make it easier to see out the side, you're still going to only look at the hedge and not the bus. It is quite tricky to get that right. When you've done the roof with new cedar laps and you've done the feather boarding and you've done this and you've done that, I wasn't sure how much was going to remain because the posts also are very rotten at the bottom and they probably need sawing off and putting into maybe metal bases so that they don't soak up the water again, and that sort of thing. Is there going to be much remaining?
Well, that's a good question, and it's always a question when you're doing repairs to an old building. How far do you go? And do you know how far you're going to go before you start? Yes, quite so. Just in this illustration I did, I showed the front low walls being removed.
Yes.
I showed the side openings being enlarged. And both of those to improve visibility in and out and make it more of a bus shelter. But you're quite right. Obviously, removing the low walls either side in the front means that the two posts which are on the edges of the entrance would become exposed. It may well prove not to be up to.
And they do get kicked.
So I imagine that those two posts would probably need replacement.
That's the corners.
But no,
These
two in the
middle
middle,
ones.
what become freestanding posts.
Yeah.
Not a big deal, they're just pieces of wood, but it needs doing. And it's quite possible that the other stud-work supports for the structure all the way round will need effectively new timbers bolted to the side of them at low level. this is all doable, this is all refurbishment of timber frame buildings, it happens all the time. And you're quite right to say there might come a point where you're doing so much you might as well just take it down and put another one up. And I completely understand that. And at this point, I don't know where we are on that scale. And I mean, Alf, I know you have views on the state of it, but it may be that if you need to know before you start, then we would need to take off boarding from low level all the way round and look at it and do that. So it's a good question.
Sort of, so do start off what you'd have to do in either case, which is either dismantling or pre-refurb, then take stock and decide which route to go, A or B at that point.
Well, I think I'd probably, to make the process manageable, I would do some exploratory taking away.
When you say I, you don't really mean you.
Thank you, Kate.
Yes.
Very good. I really need you.
I mean, this is the problem, that every time he says I, you think he's going to do it. He isn't going to take the bus shelter down and put it back up again. It's not like the ewe and lamb on the side.
Right, both those.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I just, as you started, and that's very helpful, Greg, in terms of the outline, recognising that I mean, if we, for argument's sake, say, well, look, something like this is the right sort of thing because it fits the conservation area, it fits the purposes of the gift, but it may be a refurbished one or a new one, and it'll be something of this sort.
Yeah.
So then I start wondering, and I don't want to plunge too far in, but there is a problem with splashing in, which will be worse when we haven't got 40 or 60% of it covered with wood, which of course rots because it gets splashed. And I'm not sure that even those new windows that have been enlarged and moved forward will enable us to see the buses, even if we can shorten lower the hedge a bit, because there is also a rather tricky bend just there, and the hill. Everything's sort of against us, you know.
Yeah, actually, if you're standing up outside the bus shelter, looking up the road, you can generally see the bus over the hedge well before.
Yeah, but then you're not in the shelter.
But I certainly, from the point of view of splashing water, I actually think the drainage further up the road, which blocks every other week with leaves, might need some attention to reduce the amount of water in that gutter.
On the same side?
Sorry?
On the same side of the road?
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
a culvert.
There's a culvert which Alf clears every few weeks.
Right.
I clear every few weeks. It just fills all the time.
So
It's
that's
not surprising.
fixable then?
But actually it could do with improvement so that there wasn't so much water going down the road. That would help. As to how much water is really getting right into the bus shelter, I'm not sure it's that bad.
Okay.
And speeding cars are not helping,
Well, of
because
course.
they are still speeding past the
No,
bus.
indeed. That's fairly a difficult problem, though, as we know. The side windows, they're good for letting light into the shelter, although there will obviously be a lot going in at the front as well. Are they going to play a part in being able to see the bus coming, or is it just for light? Because the next thing is this will allow the wind to blow through more.
Yeah, I think the wind blowing through more is a good thing.
It's
And
good,
I think
not bad.
that behind our whole wish to make the bus shelter more open is to make it less attractive as a place to hang out hour after hour with your mates. And actually being able to see into it for people like us walking by who get on perfectly well with the young people in the village, not a problem, but you know, to be keeping an eye on them and actually discouraging them from misbehaving because they know we can see them is a major part of this.
Especially if they're using the gate onto Coronation Field, they'll actually see the occupants of the bus shelter for longer.
Sure.
And the street light will... We had this conversation with you in December about possibly putting the bus shelter under the street light. But opening up the openings as much as that will mean the street light gets in there after it comes on.
That's true.
So it's not all about buses, Jeremy, I think.
No, okay. And are we right in terms of thinking that, I mean, we've just talked about the wind going through. Are we definitely right, bear in mind the whole front is open anyway, not to be endeavouring to glaze those two with something that really is vandal-proof, if there is ever anything vandal-proof, short of a tank?
By all means, but first of all, it's expensive, and secondly, you know, we do see bus shelters all over the country with their windows smashed, don't we?
Well,
So, you know,
well, it depends which glazing
it clearly
it is.
hasn't been solved yet.
Yeah, I know it's very difficult, especially if you've got a bottle to do it with.
I actually don't think that, although obviously every so often the wind blows strongly and one needs to shelter behind a wall, most of the sheltering we do is from the rain above, and I don't think opening it up is going to make it too exposed for people waiting for a bus.
Who've of course had to walk to the shelter in the first place, so I mean,
And they don't stand in a row outside it because they don't like it.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? So the way I see it, there's 4 options. Do nothing, knock it down, repair it, or put a brand new one. And Yvonne did a great job giving us an example of the one manufactured in the West Midlands and then trucked down here with a crane lorry. I also thinking about this is not a building that's going to be occupied for a long period of time, typically by people catching a bus. Most people in the village, I would say, who do catch a bus have a pretty good idea when the buses go, so they don't go.
Sorry,
Well,
carry
if
on.
there's evidence of people going out to catch a bus 2, 3, 4 hours ahead of the bus,
Well,
they
even
won't
20 minutes
happen.
can be.
well, that's not
Common.
but that's not a long period of time.
Mhm.
Okay, it isn't
Sure.
in my view. If there was no bus shelter, the challenge of getting splashed would still be there, obviously. To my mind, when I'm looking at this, when I saw your document, which I think is absolutely first class, and thank you for all your effort there, I went straight to this, and because I looked at the picture at the beginning, which looked like a relic from the Battle of the Alamo afterwards, I thought, there's no way this can be rebuilt. And I'm not an expert, but there just seemed to be so many bits coming out, if you excuse the pun, that just said, by the time you spent, by the time you commission someone to examine it, take it to bits, and then work out what can be saved, it might just be the dedication plaque on the back, is the original feature. So I just went to the assumption that your after picture here would be what it would look like if we commissioned a local craftsman to work to that brief and what have you. So I think it comes back to that choice between is it savable? It doesn't seem to be, and I take your point, Kate, about not volunteering Greg to be the person who does all the work on that. And then I think that
out of another piece of work by
well,
Greg.
we've got a kind of a rough budget target from Yvonne. Is it £9.5 grand roughly?
Yes.
Something like that. So my thought, and you did suggest this in your document, if we could find somebody local who could take it on and build it to a specification, the like of which your after picture I think is a very good one, then that creates work locally.
Yeah.
It's got that association, and I think it maintains the spirit of why it was donated in the first place.
Yes.
And it's coronation year, and it's on Coronation Field, so it's something could be something to celebrate.
So I just think that I'm not sure what else as councillors we can be educated on when it comes to buses. So I'm just mindful of our agenda
Yeah.
and moving on,
Sure.
Do you have a
but
range,
without wanting to cut anyone in the public session
do you have a
short.
range of money that you think a refurb or rebuild of a wooden one is likely to fall within? You know, sort of a low ball and a high ball, giving yourself room. Bearing in mind the uncertainty. I'm not asking you an actual
conversations
number.
like this long enough to know to be careful at
But
this
is
point.
it like sort of, is it somewhere like say between 2 and 6 or 5 and 10 or what?
I think your earlier question about whether by the time you've done all that much refurbishment it hasn't cost as much as it would to rebuild is a good one. I would have thought that the sort of budget you're talking about would make this possible.
The sort of budget being what?
Well, I heard 9,500.
Yes,
$9.5
yes,
for
the
the
road
purpose-built
yes.
one, shipped down and
The
installed.
purpose built one was 9.5.
It's worth working with the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that Greg was going to say to you that he would produce the specification.
I can do that, although we would need to decide whether it's a refurbishment or a new one before I do that. So I think the council needs to come to a position as to what it wants.
Are there opportunities here, Greg, if we take a deep breath and say that we will build new, that we have the advantages of picking our wood? So, for instance, the posts are all either pre-treated or they're larch or they're something or other that will be better in the weather and things like that, rather than we have no idea what that is.
No doubt, as long as they're containable within the budget. An
What
oak-framed building is more expensive than a soft
What
wood.
building?
An oak-framed
Oh,
building is more expensive.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking
than
of oak particularly, I was
no.
thinking of just
But
whatever
we
will
just-
stand up to the weather.
I mean,
Scaffold poles would be less.
if I were doing this and if the front two posts were to be renewed or new anyway because it's a new building, I'd suggest they are hardwood. The rest of it might not need to be hardwood. So I'm
So
sure
the structural poles, hardwood.
the freestanding ones.
Oh, those two, just those two.
Yes, absolutely.
Even their corners wouldn't need to be, you
Not
know.
necessarily. No.
Okay.
After all, it's not built of hardwood now. It's the weatherboarding is oak, but the rest of it's just normal pine,
Yeah.
softwood.
You're just going to say something, Colin?
I'm just thinking, following on from what Paul said, and what regarding the present situation and taking it forward, that if Greg was able to do some kind of general costings, in particular, I would go for a model which could be developed by local craftsmen at a within that 10,000 budget, on a similar lines to what he suggests at the present time on this refurbishment.
Okay.
Right. And
Jeremy?
Simon, yes.
Sorry, but very briefly for me. Well, firstly, I mean, I used to be a chartered surveyor, and I went into that profession because I like our buildings. I live in a timber
Even
frame.
old bus shelters.
Even timber frame. I live in a timber framed house. I'm happy to help.
Great.
I have specified timber frame work in the last couple of weeks, so I'm happy to help with that.
Well, that sounds very good because I was about to say one thing I can't do is price the work.
Right.
So if somebody else can, brilliant.
If I can probably help specify.
Yeah,
It'd be difficult with pricing, but yes, we can try.
And I can understand that the council needs to have
3
some
tenders.
feedback on cost. I have put up my hand. I'm not qualified to give you that advice.
No.
I can put my finger in an air.
I can appreciate that, Kirk. I don't want to put you on the spot, but, you know, out of comes out, the possibility of working together.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Both. Does anyone else want any more questions and answers at this point?
Well, there's one thing I discovered, which you perhaps know, and that is that the bench, which I was complaining about last time, it's 12 feet long, was actually built by Dave Izzard. Mandy told me that. Mandy, who stands at that bus shelter every morning from 20 to 9 till off, sometimes 20 past 9. She's my information on everything now. we don't want to inadvertently upset people who have made things for it before. And that includes Alf.
Well, like you just said, she stands there, she doesn't actually sit on it, does she?
No, she's
Exactly.
in fact, she
So,
stands outside. She
as
doesn't
far
have
as
a
I'm
mobile phone,
concerned,
so she has
that
to
bench
go
shouldn't be in there. The bench isn't in there, the kids won't go in there and sit down. This is why it's all being done. Take the bench out, everything else is fine. Get rid of the bench.
Yeah, the bottom line is it's an eyesore, and something's got to be done sooner rather than later.
I kind of make a point about the wind. Prevailing winds here are southwesterly, so they blow from behind it. The full force of the wind, most of the time, will be from behind it.
Yeah, true.
Fair enough.
Can I just go back to David Izzard? I would imagine did it as a councillor, because he was a councillor some years ago.
Okay.
So I would imagine that's because they did have
Let's get on.
quite a few councillors at the time that were hands-on. I mean, they
Right
cleaned, in fact, David Izzard, and I think it was probably Paul Stern, we expect them to clean the War Memorial at one time. They were our hands-on councillors, so I would imagine.
Perhaps he'd like his bench back then.
So it's just that, you know, the upset business.
Maybe we can turn the bench to good purpose in some way.
Can we just think then a bit more, because Alpha's put in, not for the first time, that he'd dearly love to see the bench disappear, because then the children won't be, or young people won't be, well, they may still congregate, but they'll do it in a different manner. At the moment, the bench might be a bit too tacky for most people who might otherwise want to sit on it to do so. The young people probably don't bother about that. And there's also the proposal that Greg has made of having the sort of slopey thing that you can lean on, like they use on underground platforms and things, and some bus shelters, with or without a hinge in some cases. What councillors, are we going to have to discuss this in a minute, but before we leave the public session, what do people think about whether we're going to want to keep a seat or not?
With respect to the public here, unless anyone's got any comments from the public on the seats that we haven't heard, I think we can take that in the outside of public session, I would suggest.
Okay.
Because otherwise, we're in danger of...
Can I just say,
in
the 10 years that I've been doing this job, in that bus shelter, there's been all sorts of paraphernalia. You've got the nitrous oxide, which has always been in there. You've got cannabis, which has always been in there. Sniffing aerosols, which has always been in there. There's been several things congregating always in that bus shelter. Yeah. Make it not a nice place to be, and then those sort of things, I'd probably go somewhere else, but it won't be in a bus shelter.
I don't suppose that's what Miss Apletree had in mind.
Not at all.
Not before.
Might have
I mean, the
had
alternative is putting a vending machine in and selling those things and raising some funds, but that might not be the approach.
They might rip the vending machine off the wall.
And personally, let's move on to the...
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else want to, on that topic? Anything else from Grace or Kate?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to listen to your conversation.
So, thank you for that. We go on to your parking issue in Orleans.
This is a letter from the Borough Council with reference to a person applying for a disabled parking bay in Forge Mead. There have been letters sent to the residents, so I understand that no one has contacted me directly. It's at the eastern end of Forge Mead, on the northern side, in the northeast corner of the turning head. If no one's got a good compass and I'm terrible at it, there's a little map here.
It's on the right hand side.
Well, as you drive up Forge Mead towards the bungalow, it's on the left hand side.
Left-hand side.
I was bringing it up just to get an idea of what the Parish Council had on designating a parking bay. To my knowledge, it would be the first parking bay in Wittersham that's ever been designated as anything, other than general public parking. The other thing that a lot of people don't realise with these disabled persons parking bays is that anyone with a blue ticket can park in them, not just the one who's put there for the convenience of. So if it was two places down further where it wasn't quite so obstructive, maybe when it's empty and everything else is full, that might be an idea. I was looking for ideas and so that I could formulate a response.
I can't place where you're talking about, after all that. Can't tell where it
You've
is.
got a copy of it,
What number Forge Mead is the house?
don't actually say that.
No, it doesn't give you
No,
the...
something gives the name of the people.
It's in the hammerhead at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, it's right there.
It's right at that corner.
I see.
I can fit the trailer in there, behind it. I'm up for it.
The reason this isn't on the agenda,
Have we seen it?
The reason this isn't on the agenda is it was just too late and they wanted the opportunity to raise it with us.
I don't know which is the house that the person that wants to walk on, but that's
Oh, yes, yes.
It's like you know, these houses.
Well, yeah,
Okay, everyone knows where it is.
Yeah. And why do they need
as far as I can determine, it's where the bungalows are, which is quite obviously where disabled people might not to live because it's bungalow.
Can I just ask you?
Just one at a
So
time.
I gather.
Go on.
Can I just ask you? You've put out a notice, and you haven't had a response back from
Oh, I didn't put this notice out, the Borough Council sent this notice out.
Right.
This is a copy of the
Yeah.
notice, and they sent it out just saying the resident of Forgemead has applied for disabled parking, personal parking.
Okay, I did point out to Mick that on Google Street View there is a car which looks like an old level Vauxhall Zafira parked in that space. The space, according to the council officer, has to be a minimum of a certain length. The Zafira is the same length plus 4 inches. It's already hanging over the curb at the back, which the parking space won't, and at the front it's just about to be occluding the passage into the garages, which half probably knows up there. So my feeling is if the council officer comes out and measures it, he may find it doesn't fit.
Can I make
Yes,
another point, Jeremy?
Go on.
And that is that if it's at a president, there is the people in the house opposite us, number 5, just across the road. The lady there has a severely disabled child, and she requests that people don't park there because her little boy can run, instead of going out to the car, run straight out to the road, and there could be a nasty situation. So she might see that as a precedent, because I think she's already requested it actually.
who's already requested it? This applicant has asked to have one.
No, the house,
Oh, number 5.
number 5.
Yeah,
I
But it
think
was turned down.
The other point that's made by Ashford Borough Council is about enforcement, and they do refer to yellow lines. So one of the solutions could be you put double yellows all around Forgemead, and then only disabled people could park there. And the point you make, and I'm saying that in tongue in cheek, right?
Good.
The point you make about if you do one for one and then one for another, you know, setting a precedent, there is a real danger there. And to single a person, and your point about just putting the space there doesn't mean it's their personal usage. There's no right, you know. And we've got right now in Tenterden, there's a massive issue on parking around Homewood School. That's all over the social media and what have you. And people are arguing that they can't do this, they can't do that. And other people are saying there's no law that says they can't park their car there and what have you. And something like this strikes me as the opportunity for someone who's disabled to be able to be as near as possible to their house. I completely applaud. But if you start to say, well, how many disabled people are there in that area? And then, are there any disabled people in Coomlands? I think there are 1 or 2. If you look at where the blue badges are in the village, I would say we might have, 50, 60 blue badges in the whole of the parish. And I just think it's a really difficult situation to pursue for the benefit of one person. And it sounds a bit harsh saying it, but we could get into a terrific muddle. And then what we managed to do, in this village is resist the yellow lines. And that could be the thin end of the wedge.
Yvonne wants to say something.
I know that there is a problem with parking up there. I mean, there's a problem with parking in all the roads within Wittersham. A few years ago, probably now, when I met with the housing officer up there, and we were saying about there's so much green up there. You know, it's not as if, and it's not their front gardens, it's council-owned land all the way down there. And we were saying, so why can't we have more parking bays? Well, he actually did say that yes, perhaps we could consider it. But then I've also heard that they don't like, Ashford doesn't like giving away, taking away green spaces.
If I can go back a few years, if I can go back a few years, before we had any parking in Forge Meads at all, it was pretty bad. So I got a deputation up to Ashford Borough Council, signed by 33 people, I think, and sent it in. And they said, yes, we'll do it. So they did it, but they made the point that the only reason they did it at that time, this is quite a few years ago, as you will realise, is that the criteria was if less than 50% of the council houses are privately owned, the council will pay for it. If more than 50% are privately owned, the council won't. But whether that's still relevant to this situation, I'm not sure. It certainly was at one time.
It probably wouldn't be relevant to disabled parking bay, but it is relevant to parking elsewhere.
I think this is part of the issue in a way, going round in a circle, that as Paul has suggested, one disabled space or two or three are not in themselves the issue. It's the fact that you haven't got enough in the first place and you've just taken 3 away, the answer to which, however unpalatable, is that Ashford's then got to provide more. But of course Ashford doesn't wish to provide more, partly because they don't want to lose the green space, partly because it's their land that they're putting them on, and partly because they have to pay the money. And add those all together, and we've got the irresistible force and the immovable object. Yeah, Kate.
Can I just add in one thing, and that is that if it's council-owned land, at some stage the council will want to put in electric car charging facilities, for at least for their social housing tenants on that site. And that may make a difference to the way that everybody parks there. Because they don't own their land, they can't pull up to their front doors like we perhaps can further
Well,
on.
they're orphaned because they've got the council-owned land. They've got a front garden, typically, which doesn't actually touch the road.
Yeah, and people have been parking on their front gardens in Forge Meads and Jubilee Fields. They've been driving up over the grass,
Which isn't
which must be
theirs.
driving some of their neighbours.
Yes, it's caused serious fallouts.
So they have got a parking issue in there.
Oh, indeed. And
I think
you're
you
right.
might.
Everyone knows there's a parking issue, of course, Kate, and they don't actually want to address it in a way that helps to resolve it. And we understand why. I mean, we've just been around that.
Perhaps if the parish council could encourage Ashford to look ahead to the ways that people might park when they've got electric vehicles, that would be a good...
The electric vehicles point is an interesting one, but it's just an added obstacle or an added difficulty to the underlying problem, which is that Forge Meads, like Lloyd's Green in its time, was built without consideration for parking because people didn't have the cars then.
Well, there's 6 garages when they built those houses.
Well, there you go, you see.
Out of 32, that's not too bad. 36, sorry.
I suppose they could go into their garages to charge their cars.
They wouldn't
If
fit.
they had a garage.
And they wouldn't fit.
The cars are
There
too
are
big.
some.
Sorry?
There are still quite a lot of garages on the Forge Meads.
On the Forge Meads, there is some there. People don't use a garage to put cars in these days.
No, don't fit.
Well, no, they don't fit. They use them as a spare vehicle.
Well, they'll all have to use the bus, the wonderful bus.
Okay.
Another bus stop.
Right, Mick asked what our opinion was, and this isn't one for the council session itself, council meeting isn't on the agenda. So, do councillors want to give Mick their view of what the question he's asking before he has to go back and give a view to his officers? Colin?
This is not an easy one to make any recommendation at this point in time. It would be nice that there was some facility to deal with the individual, but I don't think we are able to recommend at this stage that anything changes. Stop.
Yeah, I agree.
Same thing, Paul?
I think you should go back and say this is a bigger issue, picking up Kate's point that we would like Ashford Borough Council to consider a longer term plan, which includes electric vehicle charging, and rather than just take one specific piece, if you like, that they look at the thing overall, and maybe someone has to come and do a site survey, dare I say, get out of the office and actually look at it, maybe talk to the residents and offer them options. But I think it's about this one incident raises the whole thing, and if they're going to take a more integrated, longer-term view, then they need to have a proper parking plan for the area.
It gives them an opportunity, Paul, but, you know, will they take it?
Well,
That's the question.
That's the whole thing. I think what we should do is go back and say we realise that there's a really wonderful opportunity here to look at this in the round, and that's our recommendation as a council.
And to engage with the residents
Yeah.
on a potential solution, because it will keep returning.
Alan?
I don't have anything to add.
Sue?
I agree with everything Paul said. There's enough green the other side to make another big parking area.
Sure. I think the only thing I'd add is that the council may say, whether they're right or not, that the Disabled Discrimination Act, DDA, puts an obligation on them to do it anyway. But in that case, if they feel they have to do it anyway, they're not discriminating, by the way, at the minute against the disabled person, they'd be making it worse for everybody else. But no matter, they'll have a view on, you know, what their position is there. But they really ought to, if they are going to do that, and if it fits, because I'm not clear that it does, without blocking off the garages, then I think they really do oblige themselves to look at it in the wider picture as well.
The main thing they've got different here to the normal places where you see disabled parking spaces is disabled parking spaces are in complete car parks. Forge Mead isn't a car park.
No, that's the issue. So I would agree with everything that Paul said in respect of that. We should just put it back to them and said, you know, we really should be conversing with them directly and not in any other way. And hopefully to come with a solution, whatever that is. Yeah.
And the other reason I brought it on is because letters have been sent to residents. So I thought local parish councillors might get asked the same question.
And that's not, sorry Mark, that's not passing the buck, it's a reality.
Yes, yeah.
Did they send one to the parish clerk?
Well, no idea.
I've got the same
Good.
thing. Yes, I have.
Yes,
it.
excellent. I didn't
Not
know.
in time, so
But it was too late.
too late
Yeah.
on the agenda.
Okay, your other
This
point.
goes to fire.
It
Goes to fire.
I don't know.
It's ideal. Yeah.
A point of interest only to those that understand the planning officers in the Borough Council is that at the end of this week, one of the most senior planning officers leaves, Mark Berry.
All right.
His contract is up and he's moving on to another. There is a replacement for his position already imposed by the name of Mr. Tim Hickley, Hickling.
Hitchkin.
Hickley.
He's in post already.
Yeah, I shall meet him tomorrow. If you want to come along to my planning committee, you can meet him. I don't recommend it.
Before the other person left, I mean, that's unique.
Tell us
Well,
the name again.
Hickling. Hickley. No, there's not an N in it.
Oh, H-I-C-K.
Ling.
Hickley, yeah, well, and that's one of the easier names to pronounce up there.
Right, gotcha.
And the other thing that I have got down here is, by the end of this month, the community fund, grant fund that each borough council has will be stopped because of it's the end of the financial year for this regime. There is some money left.
Is there?
Flash shelter.
9,000.
Whatever you
That's
wish,
good.
do put it on the form and get it to me so I can get it to, what's her name? Michelle, yeah. By the end of the month.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's very generous, so Mike.
Solar panels.
Right.
That could be your Paul.
Okay, thank you for that.
Very generous.
Does anyone else have anything to raise in the public session before we close that?
No.
No? Okay. So I'll go back to the parish council meeting. Everybody is in the public is entitled to stay there and listen to us until we get right almost to the end of the meeting, but you can't participate anymore. Right, let's move that on.
I've got a couple.
So it's now the minutes of the meeting, which you have had circulated. Does anyone have any concerns with the minutes?
No.
No.
Can I sign them then?
Yes.
Please.
Okay, that's done. Matters arising. The ACRK update is in there since last month. Action with Communities in Rural Kent, which is a charity which had its arrangements wound up on the 13th of January. There are efforts underway to see how its services can be continued for the benefit of parish and town councils and district and borough councils. I've been involved in a number of meetings on that and conversations on the phone which are ongoing. It's all a little bit up in the air at the minute. I've had some conversations today, but it's in a bit of a waiting for something in another week and waiting for something in another 2 weeks. So I can't really add anything very material. It's just where it is. I'm moving along, hopefully, towards something helpful, but I can't be sure of one way or the other. Now we come to the future of the bus shelter that we've been discussing in the public session. In terms of a decision now, who wants to start us off for what they think we should do and in what order? Nobody.
Well, I'll just revisit. I think that having heard Greg particularly and seen his suggestions, to me, and also having the benefit of Yvonne's research and the cost of a purpose-built one to be transported and installed, I think that our way forward is investigate whether or not it can be renovated or what have you, but it's unlikely. And I think what we need to do briefly is to get a design, a structure mapped out, a specification of what we want. I think that Greg's design of the after in his document, for me, fits the bill. I think we should then come up with that spec, and forgive me, I don't know your name, but Simon. Yeah, you're quite correct, Simon. That is your name. Between you, if we can come up with some sort of cost, and then put it out to a tender in the village to see who would come forward with that, and go for it. My inclination is not to put any seats in it to start with, and see if we get any complaints. If there are no complaints, then we've saved the cost of a bench. The bench that was in there, maybe David would like it back, or we could, make something out of it. But I don't think we need to be hampered by that. I just think we need to get on with it. I'm mindful that the quicker we do it, the quicker we can get a request into our borough councillor for a slice of his remaining funds. We just need to crack on with it, and to me, we have a new bus shelter.
I think I would totally agree with what Paul's saying, that if Greg and can actually do something together, then I think we should progress with it as quickly as is humanly possible. I think it's an eyesore.
Sure.
There will be other funds available, sources of funds,
yes,
with the coronation coming up and with lottery money. It's a community facility.
That's right.
So there will be opportunities to apply for it, and there's probably every chance we could end up actually covering all the costs without dipping into parish council funds.
I would agree with you and Charlie on that. It is those funds are available.
Well, you usually have to put in a bit to demonstrate a good faith, as it were, but certainly, as you say, there might be some others available as well. Okay, so that's...
And sorry, the last thing I'll say that struck me is that our Victorian forefathers raised these public buildings through public subscription. I mean, let's not rule that out. We could have a bus shelter appeal, or some sort of, you know, that's how we used to do things in communities. It's completely for the benefit of the community, not for any particular segment of it.
Right, and it's apple tree. Yeah. So that's Paul and Colin, I guess, has said his bit. Leslie?
I don't have any particular strong view on this. I'm quite happy to go along with what you're saying on it. Just a couple of things though. I mean, we have 4 bus stops in Wittersham.
I know, and there's only one with a shelter.
Why do we have just one bus shelter, if any?
It's the place we
does
have
it
a
have
bit
a
of land to put
priority
it on.
need?
Yeah, well, if you go to the other shelters, we don't have the land to put it on.
No.
The one at Forge Meads, the one at Lloyd's Green, I mean, then there's a bit of Ashford land that you could put a shelter on, but that would depend on Ashford.
I understand all
the
that,
one-
but what I'm saying is that people seem to be able to stand and wait for the bus
There was something there.
without a shelter at the other 3 points.
Seat.
There was a
Did you
seat,
need
definitely was a
There
seat,
was,
and a notice board.
well, the notice board's there now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it
Yes.
would be nice to have one.
I didn't notice it.
for Forge maybe.
Well, let's
But
start
I
with the
think
one.
there was a
There was
seat.
definitely a seat,
I
oh
mean,
yeah.
it is on a price that we can afford and get the
You're right,
so
you're
we'll
right,
accept one.
that there's, I mean, subject to the land, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So for instance, at Lloyd's Green, on the north side, there is space because it's Ashford land, although they might be picky about it. On the south side, no, because you've only got a footpath. If you go to the shop, you've only got the footpath. You can't go in the parking spaces, you know, and so on. Opposite the one that we've got, you've got the lay-by for the bus to pull in, you know. It's tricky.
I know you've explained that before. I think my real point is if the other 3 bus stops
All
seem
true.
to exist without a shelter, do we need to have one here? As much as a building, I see it was designed by dear Mr. William Gardner, who I knew briefly.
Your predecessor.
Right. Well, not quite, but one.
Right.
Yes, I mean, any legacy to him in the village, I think.
Yeah,
And that's the other
is
problem.
worth
points rather
considering.
than
It's a legacy to Miss Apriltree.
But also,
Right, Alan.
Shamefully, I'm not a frequent user of the bus service, and I no excuse for that, but I shouldn't be. What I do know is, though, that if I'm standing on the station at Staplehurst and the weather is inclement, I'm quite grateful to the shelter that has got sides, because you can retreat into it as the wind blows up the platform. And of course, standing in a shelter without sides out there, if the bus is late, probably a very miserable experience. So that's just one thought. And then we also just reflect how we're going to continue to commemorate Miss Apriltree, because perhaps a sign can go on a new one if there is going to be a new one.
Well, we assume that, I think.
Yeah.
Sue?
Yeah, I agree. I like the design very much, thank you. I would suggest what Alpha said, not to put a seat in it. I think it's a very good idea. And there may be people in the village who might even decide they'd like to not charge for their labour, perhaps, if people come forward.
Right, true.
So I certainly think of
I think it's
somebody.
a bit of a pipe dream, but you never know.
Well, I don't know. It's surprising.
We're not talking about plumbing on this occasion.
It's possible. Okay, so I kind of join in with a lot of that. I do worry about the open sides wind-wise, but I heard what Greg said and also Phil about not Phil, it was Phil about the wind direction.
Yeah.
I think that we've definitely got to have the memorial to Miss Apriltree still. Even though I can't quite work out what it says, it's the most curious form of words, as though they got a bit muddled up. What it actually says is very strange, but never mind. And I think also the point about having the bus timetable in there, if we can, which we ought actually to be able to get in a proper bus timetable holder from the bus company.
They have been asked.
Yeah, okay. Well, if we're going to make a new bus shelter. I think if that all fitted together, if Greg can look at the design and specification in more detail in terms of the drawing and Simon can help with what you said.
Some specification work,
Indeed.
perhaps move towards costing.
And costed. And I do think certainly, but this is something you know more about than I do, Greg, that it should have its posts all put in those things like you did with your garage, where they are kept off the ground in a steel thing, and that's just set in the concrete, which then makes it pretty sturdy. Still going for the cedar lap roof is sensible, is it?
Yes, I see no reason why not. I mean, the only reason it's dilapidated is because of small boys climbing about on it, which happens frequently. So, you know, if they can't climb up onto it because you move the bus stop post away, it makes it less likely to be.
Is there a problem with them climbing up on the litter bin for the same reason?
Yes, but it's not so easy. The easiest way is to shin up the pole and jump across.
Okay.
And if you're 30
We have to deal with that with the KCC, I think, put the bus post in the bus stop. Okay, that's the bus shelter, I think, moving
Can
on.
I just say one
Go
final
on.
thing on it? I just think it's a bit of a shame that we can't give the same sort of time and energy to trying to resolve finding somewhere for these young people
Yes.
to congregate, because they will. I mean, young people always do, have done forever. And you know, there isn't anywhere in this village for young people to do that or to meet up.
Sure.
And I just think we should give thought to that.
No problem.
And that's wrapped into the sort of the concept that we were discussing last time of placing the village hall and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying that we shouldn't. It's open question. I mean, you're right next door to Coronation Field, and for instance, and we have talked about, I mean, whether it's going to come to pass or not, the question of putting a footpath on the south side of Stocks Road going through the field. And if you did have a footpath going through the field, then the opportunity is there to put something adjoining the path, rather than in the middle of the mud, I mean.
Yeah.
You know. It would be strange in a way, you have two things near each other, but one is a bus shelter and one isn't. Okay, let's move on then. That was the bus shelter, so we're on to another meaty one, the highway improvement plan. Now, Yvonne sent a note around, which you all got today. The list, I think we had before, I certainly had anyway. They're in a different order, but this is to do with the fact that we need to, under Kent County Council highways system now, to be saying what we would like to see done in terms of the highway, and also be prepared to pay for or contribute to what we would like.
I must have hit something like that.
And they have to go onto a form which is submitted to highways. They would then look at it, they would come along, they'd have a discussion with us and tell us how much they wanted for any of them, and we'd have to negotiate and decide what we want.
Agenda item 6.
Now, we would have to put them in priority order, but the first thing to do is to consider the actual items themselves. Now, the order that Yvonne has sent out, first one, and this is just a random order, it's not in priority order at the minute. The first one on her list is the footway that we've talked about in the past, from the Memorial Garden gate, that's the pedestrian gate in the street, to the hairdresser's front yard. That's those, I don't know, 20 yards, 15 yards, whatever it is, of grass. We wanted to do this some years ago. Yvonne checked with the highway steward, who said there was no problem at all. Then when she made a formal request of KCC, they said, oh no, it's got to go on the highways improvement plan and be considered, and you'll need to give us money so that we can think about it and all the rest of it. Although I think that last bit maybe then got picked away we had a discussion here with Mike Hill, the county councillor, one time about it. So, as far as I can judge, unless people tell me different, this is one that we have long been interested in doing. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, the footway from the bus shelter to Mill House, i.e. just past the garage, that's the one I just mentioned, going through the Coronation Field,
Yeah.
or indeed going along the road, but I don't think there's room on the road side.
That's a great shame. Because I think those houses should be served by a footpath.
No, you've got me wrong there.
Oh, sorry.
No, Mill House, up to Mill House, not the garage.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about not enough room on the front of Coronation Field.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about the bus shelter along the road to Mill House.
That's what we are.
We are.
We're talking about, it says here, footway from the bus shelter to Mill House.
Yeah.
And I then said that is just past the garage.
Yeah.
Can you just remind me which mill is?
Mill House is
The
where Miriam
entrance.
lives.
The entrance.
Mill House is where Miriam lives.
It's the last
Okay.
house.
Sorry, I was thinking that we were going to a back garden across Coronation Field.
No.
I was
No,
thinking,
not in the list.
well, it was a great idea, but what are we going to build when we get to Mill
no.
House? Okay.
What we have talked about before,
Block of flats.
what we have talked about before is,
Alongside the main road.
Yes.
Right,
well,
got it.
we're going around in circles here. There is the possibility of a path along the main road. However, there are two issues. One is whether there's enough room there of highway land. And secondly, and we've talked about this more than once in the past, whether it would actually be better for pedestrians and all the rest of it to actually route the path through Coronation Field with a gate by the garage. We've talked about this more than once in the past, several times.
So that wouldn't be to Mill House, that would be to the
Well,
garage.
you would at least come out to the, well, you can't get to Mill House without going past the garage. So it
No,
gets
I
you as
know,
far as the garage.
But that's halfway.
It gets you as far, more than that, it gets you as far as the garage.
Okay. But that would not include.
This actually says Mill House.
Yes.
I'm merely clarifying that there are two routes for the first part, which we have talked about before. The inclusion of Mill House is a new change which Yvonne put on her list. It didn't used to say Mill House. I'm not disagreeing with it. It didn't used to say Mill House. It used to be to the
That's in
garage.
my
It's usually the garage.
notes. We did say it was one of Leslie's suggestions that it went from there to Mill
Mill
House,
House,
then it
recently.
went through
Yeah.
all the way across.
I don't
The
disagree
only
with
issue,
that.
the issue I have with your suggestion of going, and I know it's been brought up before, and I still maintain the same thing. You would have to have a gate that goes out onto the road, because otherwise you're coming out the gate onto the garage property, which you wouldn't be able to do.
No,
It's
not
there,
out onto the
so
road.
you'd have to come out onto the road.
Well, onto the grass next to the road, actually. It's the same bit of grass next to the road which you would otherwise, in your plan, have a path along. There's either room for the path, in which case you can come out onto it, or there isn't. And I think that's actually quite narrow. It's also got a slope on it.
So there's more than one option, basically.
Of course not. Yeah.
Okay. So I think.
But
that
there is an issue, and it'll have to be forked over by KCC.
So that's fine. But I think in our highways improvement plan, we should state what we want.
What we
bus
want.
shelter to Mill House alongside the road.
Stop.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And bear in mind it will be exceptionally expensive, but that's for us to argue with KCC about.
Yeah.
If the houses on Stocks Road get built, and who knows, if they get built, then they are going to have to consider a footpath.
Well, no, we could just have a pedestrian crossing going,
No,
which is a
no,
great
no.
traffic calming move across the Mill House where the
Well,
new pavement
you're
comes.
jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead, Paul.
Well, yes.
If the houses get built, the builder's got to provide a path. They are aiming to build that path on the north side of the road.
Okay.
The suggestion of putting it through Coronation Field as an alternative, which killed several birds with one stone, not counting Mill House, was to relieve them from having to build it all the way along on the north side. They could switch halfway along. There are issues about it, there are concerns, and it would or would not include a crossing, as Paul has said.
The problem is if you build it on Coronation Field, it becomes the responsibility of the parish council to maintain it, and that's what we don't want.
Well,
We want highways to maintain the footpaths, not the parish council.
well, that you're entirely right. All those things are possible, Paul. It does mean, I mean, we've been around this before. It depends on who's going from where to where, which side of the road, whether they have to cross. Almost everything in the village is on the south side, short of the Forge-Mead estate, and of course, which is on the north side, and these new houses, if they get built on the north side. Most things are on the south, including well, you could say the bus stop is on both sides, but the one that everyone queues up for is to Tenterden. The field is Tenterden, the village hall is, south side, the village hall is south side, the church is south side, the school is south side.
Well, let's stick on this list
Anyway,
with the south side,
footway from
bus
bus
shelter
shelter
to
to Mill House is
South side.
Okay.
but you won't need it if the houses get built and over that to build one on the north side. Then they'll walk along there and cross to Mill House.
Yep.
Right, village gateway, each end of village. We've talked about these before until someone says different. That would be a gateway as in the bits of white timber that we see on many other villages with slats, which are supposed to be a visual cue to the fact that they're entering a village.
I think they are.
Yeah.
It's also recognised as a traffic calming measure.
I'm not disagreeing, that's what they are.
And they've been on our agenda. David Green first proposed that, and I think about 2013 or something. So, that's a good one.
That is a possibility. Bear in mind that if you jump down to the bottom, you've got an alternative at one end, chicane as you enter the village along Stock
Well, you
Street.
can still have the village gateway sign.
You could indeed, but they are clearly addressing the same issue at one end anyhow. I'm not suggesting a chicane at the other end. I think, unless other people say different, of course, the fact is that Stocks Road is the bigger problem because people are trundling down the hill and they haven't got the degree of traffic calming that the Swan Bend does at the other end, where they are well into the 30 limit by the time they have to slow down. In fact, there's some of them about 15 feet from the bend, but never mind, they'll do it, then have to slow down. The SID pole in Swan Street, this was part of our original aim when we had the SIDs.
Yes.
KCC originally agreed it, then said they wouldn't agree it. My feeling is we should still try and get it.
Agreed.
I did have a good look down there the other day. It's actually harder than it looks to find, there's a very slight bend in Swan Street, which actually makes it more difficult on the western side than it seems when you look on the map. My feeling is there is a place that it could go, but there is a question as to who owns it. There's a bit of land there and whether that would be acceptable and whether we can persuade KCC to change their mind. But Swan Street is really another speeding problem. And funnily enough, when it was originally decided, the 30-mile-an-hour limit in Swan Street goes way, way down past all the houses. It's a really long 30 limit that no one takes the slightest bit of notice of. Right, the speed limit of 40 along part of Peeling Quarter Road. Now, this was put forward to Mike Hill by 2 residents about 3 years ago, maybe a bit more. I went to the meeting with Mike where they pitched it. They were turned down by the KCC officers on the grounds that they wouldn't contemplate a speed lower than 50, and 50 gets treated as a target and would make the speeding worse. Since that time, they've then put the 50 in all the way along from Small Hythe to Tenterden, where there are no houses at all. They've put 40s here, there and everywhere sporadically, where there are no houses. And the Peeling Quarter Road is both on a hill and bending. So I think that the case they made against it was very weak, and we'll have another go. I dare say they'll try to support or will support their previous decision, but we can have a pop. Someone else has suggested, and I think it's a reasonable idea, slow horses and signs from Cooper's Corner to Pear Tree Bend. I'm not sure which bend Pear Tree is, but There are some
It's the next one round the corner.
Is it on the same road?
By Pear Tree Cottage.
It's not up Wittersham Road.
Yeah.
You've got Cooper's Corner.
Yeah.
Just a
And
Tenterden
then you've
Road.
got... Then
On the Tenterden Road.
It's on where all the water runs out from Mrs.
that's
Watson's.
beyond.
Yeah.
But that's just before after Pear Tree.
Is it by Pear Tree Cottage?
Sorry?
The bend where Pear Tree Cottage is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think so.
It's sensible. I'm getting it.
There's about 4 bends down there.
No, the first one.
It's the first one.
Yes, and then you've
It's
got
just
Pear
past the
Street.
third house at Cooper's Corner.
The problem is the horses go down
Mm.
to the Browns farm
Yeah.
from
It's only
Pear
about
Tree
3
Cottage.
Good idea. Good idea.
Well, I have no problems with it.
Happy to put an extra one outside my house.
I have no problem with it, having crawled along behind a horse for about 400 yards the other day.
You can
Yeah.
purchase manure. Yeah.
Okay, right, come on.
Zebra crossing.
At a safe point along Crossler Road.
Yeah.
This is rather like the bus shelter. This is rather like the bus shelter. Wherever we have a zebra crossing, we'll only cope with a small number of people. That probably the most people crossing in any one place is just by you and Lamb, isn't it? Anyone? Who's the children coming to the school and the bus?
I would have thought opposite Dax and opposite
Got park cars.
your place.
There's a lot of children who come down that way every day to cross over, and because of the bus stops there now, there's a congregation about 10 to 8 in the morning and later on about 22 children now.
And the shop.
And the shop, you know.
Well,
And I'm not getting any
another
younger.
place for sure.
And Phil's not neither.
Paul's just said by the shop. It is certainly true, of course, that people do cross for the shop because they come
And
out
bus
of
stop,
Forge.
bus stop.
A lot
They
of
come
people.
out of Forge Meads.
Yeah.
Forge Meads.
Yes.
And if you have a zebra crossing, don't you have an area either side of it that you're not allowed to park?
You?
Yes,
So
they
that's
do.
also
The zigzags.
very-
And flashing beacons all night.
No, you can
Yes.
take different colours.
That's next.
I can double up as a lollipop man.
Hey, now we're talking.
I think it's about 17,000 for that.
Phil could go on
Have
alternative
we
days.
got a view as to where we want to have a zebra crossing?
I think that's a good place.
Which one?
By the shop.
By the shop. You go for the shop.
Have
Okay.
you approved names for it?
Well, that will be the argument, won't it? I don't think for a moment they will be very easy on it, because as we've been told before, there isn't one, I don't think, at Recreation Road in Tenterden. They got the light, sorry,
I think the difficulty is on Poplar Road
lights over there.
is the number of cars that are parked on the left-hand side.
Indeed.
And it could be a blind spot at times. But having said that, I still think it will be far better in Poplar Road because the number of people that come down from Forge Mead, from Lawrence, and come across the road there.
Bear in mind though that your zigzags take the parking out, and
Yeah.
therefore you've suddenly lost about probably 10 car parking spaces.
But it's
But
you know
buildings
it's
in
it's
themselves are a hazard, having the car parking. Now we're back to
It slows the traffic down.
parking provision.
No, the cars slow the traffic, as Yvonne says, but also it means that the amount of road you've got to cross is shorter. All right, well, another. We'll see where that looks. And the chicane as we enter the village along Stocks Road, very unlikely that they will ever countenance it, although they do exist elsewhere, even on, as far as we can tell, on bus routes.
Yeah.
It's such a speedway.
Oh, I understand the advantages, no question.
Well, at least if we put it in there as one of our suggestions,
They'll have to
right,
tell us why not.
then it's on record, just to say that we've come up with this. I think we prioritise these. You know, there are some here that in reality we're probably more likely to get earlier than others. Doesn't stop us putting them on a wish list that it says these are the things that we should have. So it's a question really of ranking them.
What we haven't got here is extending the 30 limit to the other side of Acton Lane. You know, in fact, if the Stocks Road houses get built, it gets extended to near Acton Lane, or nearer, it's around Mill House, I think.
Yes, I mean, well, it's the same problem.
Quite a long way actually to get past you, isn't it? 120 metres is what the Stocks Road houses wanted to extend it by, and I think it's probably 200 metres or 250.
Right, it's just that that turning out of Acton Lane is so tricky, and speeding only adds to the
What we
danger.
need is a compulsory purchase of a roundabout.
Well, I was thinking of an overpass.
Right, okay. Does anyone have any other points that they want to add to this?
No.
Are you looking, is the clerk looking for us to rank these? Is that something that we're
That's what I have to
required
do on the
do?
list, yes.
Okay.
All right, you're quite right. That is a point we do have to do.
Well, it all started off, this all started off with us making a very small request for the hairdressers to the Memorial Garden, and then being told that we have to construct a highways improvement plan. So maybe we start from the beginning and say our top priority is the footway. I mean, it's almost a line of least resistance.
No, I agree. That's, I think it's a sort of no-brainer, as they like to say.
Which it is at the top.
That's number one. The footway from Memorial Garden to the hairdressers. I would suggest then we go for the village gateway at each end of the village.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, because that's also a known speed slowing down.
Right. Then the next one is the Sid Pole, and the next one is the Peeling Quarter Road speed limit.
I put the slow horses before that.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it's an easy thing to do. It's low cost.
You're quite right. So then 5 is Peeling Quarter.
Go on. So we're 3 for the Sid Pole.
3 for the Sid Pole.
4 for the horses, 5 for the 40 mile an hour limit. Then we've got
For me, the footway from the bus shelter to Mill House, the zebra crossing and the chicane are all, in their own way, dependent on whether or not Stocks Road is developed.
All right, that's an order.
So do you not want those 3 foot?
Yeah,
put them in.
they're all there.
Just put them.
Yep, 6 is the footway, 7 is the zebra, and 8 is the chicane.
Yeah.
So we can try and draft something there and bring it back again. It's not going to go yet because I think it's the beginning of the year they want it, don't they?
Well, who knows when the year is? It's only going to be looked at once a year. It's the 13 mile per hour to Acton Lane.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, that's
that's
a speed limit, so that should go
that
on.
has become 9 then, because that depends on the same thing.
Yeah, all right, you could do that. Okay, fair enough.
This isn't
Right, on we go. The coronation celebrations is the next one. We talked about this lately outside the council. What I understand in terms of the timetable is that Saturday is the actual coronation. Sunday is when there's going to be some celebratory stuff going on in London on the television, but people are encouraged to have their street parties or whatever. And then Monday is a bank holiday when people will be encouraged to do some kind of voluntary effort, but who knows what. Now, on the Sunday, the street parties day, there are discussions going on now between the sports club and the Judy / Jean who did the May Day celebration last year to kind of coordinate, and possibly the school. The school is slightly uncertain because it only reaches me third hand, because the school both asked the sports club if they could use the field at some point, but also said that if there's going to be the sort of May Fair they would put stalls on it, which they also have to do, and whether that's two things or one thing, I don't know. So that kind of is the Sunday. It's being considered by a sort of committee of Julie, Jean and some sports club people, and ideally the school, and Andy Corpus, who is playing a part in that like he did last time. And my feeling, subject to councillors, and we have not been asked yet, is that if we were asked, we would perhaps be willing to make some sponsorship available to help that go in terms of, hiring the marquee or something, if indeed, like last time, there are any marquees to be hired. Because everyone's going to be on the same day, of course, so it doesn't look likely. But anyway, whatever. And so that's the Sunday. The next question is on the Saturday, when the coronation happens, there is the opportunity of people staying at home and watching their televisions. But equally, some people might be keen to have, I feel, thanks for coming, people might be happy to have, some people anyway, not the whole village, to have an event in the village hall here to watch the coronation, if indeed it could be fixed up, which is not an easy thing. It's doable. We've got the screen, we've got a projector, we need something to put into the projector, which then needs internet, which is not in the hall as things stand. So it would depend on whether it's actually doable or not. But do people have an interest in that? Indeed, if it was to be done, would people turn up for it?
Well, we did last time.
Yeah.
So our precedent.
What, at the last coronation?
No, I'll defer to you, Alan, on that one, if I may. Right, as the history man of the village. No, the last time we had something similar was William and Kate's wedding in 2011, 11, I forget, 10. And we had an event in the village hall. It was on a big screen, not the one we've got now, another one. And it was a sort of lunch tea party, and we probably had around 100, 120.
So what was
people.
Put on the screen? The actual
live broadcast of the event.
And how did they, whoever it was, manage to do it?
We ran a feed from the house next door.
Oh,
Was it an LED screen or a projector?
It was projected.
It was a feed from Judy's house, but unfortunately Judy's house is now lit out.
But we're now 13 years on. And earlier on today, I personally think we should grasp the nettle and put proper broadband internet connection in the village hall. We must be one of the last village halls in Kent that don't have it.
Will we get it in time?
Well, I don't know. I mean, but I think that we should actually say, let's find out how much it costs. Will we get it in time? Can we get a grant for it? And because it's just. For me, it's ridiculous that we still haven't got an internet connection.
Is this not something that the village hall committee should be?
Well, when we had our discussion earlier on, we were going to talk to because Sam not being here is a disadvantage in the sense that she would be the connection there. It would make sense to have that.
Has she got a committee at the moment?
Yes, she has. Yes, she's got. Someone else just joined it. I'm trying to think who it was. There's 4 or 5 of them on it.
The chairman is Mike Apps, otherwise diverted,
The other 3 villages in the ward have got it.
The other 3 villages in the ward have got it.
And they've also got the gates as well, if you want to go over.
They've got what?
The village entrance gates, the white gates
Oh,
that say,
yeah.
welcome to Wittersham, we welcome careful drivers, twinned with, and this is where it gets interesting, a very interesting wine producing area of southern France. But that's something for us to work on, of course.
Well, they were testing to
Okay, so who's going to contact the committee?
give a form to me, please.
I can work with Yvonne on gathering the information on that. I'll contact Sam and we'll find out what's been going on and get a costing on it. And as Leslie said, are we too late? I don't know.
Good to see you again.
There'll be different implications.
Good luck tomorrow night with the
Oh, thanks.
What I do,
See you
Good
soon.
night, good night.
Panic.
Is this your swan song?
No, not quite.
Bedtime, Mick.
Bring wine next time.
what I do know is that there is a phone line into the cupboard, the place, the little room in there, the storage room. There is a phone line in there. It doesn't do anything, but it exists. Which I think was where the broadband was hopelessly put in before, which then of course we know never worked.
Yeah.
And I also know, I didn't know this till the other day, there's ISDN which doesn't work anymore, or probably, and it's not what we need, but it goes into the cupboard that was used by the post office because they used to use it.
Well, I think the fact that
And
there
it
is
may be convertible.
the fact there's a line that goes into here is a big tick in the box.
It is.
We've got, as Mick said, we're the only of the 4 village halls in the ward that don't have it. So three village halls have already been down that path. So there's lessons learned. We can contact them. I'll work with Yvonne and I'll talk to Sam and the hall and just see where we are. If at the end of the day we can't get it, it won't be through lack of trying.
No.
And once we get it, once we can get it, that's no problem. I can connect that, and we've got the lead that can connect any laptop into the projector, and we've got fantastic. I mean, there's £15,000 worth of projections and sound equipment in there not being used at the moment.
Sure, that's all true. Right, okay.
Let's go to that.
So that's the Saturday. We know about the Sunday. We did you get the chance to talk to whoever about the month?
I did ask when you get in response.
We've done it now.
With
After?
Yes.
Okay.
When I did it since we
We'll wait to
Wednesday,
hear what
but-
the score is from the school as to whether they would appreciate coronation marks. Okay.
What about your idea, Yvonne, of the best dressed house competition? The coronation. Do you think people will dress their house as that?
Well, we've had
They did the
buntings
scarecrows and all that, so they may well
Yeah.
do.
and we had something else, didn't we? Because Andy
Yes.
Sills
Yes.
posted he taking his daughter around to look at all
Yes.
the houses. What was that?
Oh, that
for?
was Christmas lights, wasn't
Christmas
it?
lights. So we've done scarecrows, we've done Christmas lights.
we did best decorated house.
Best
But
decorated.
Yes.
for the when Charles and Diana got married, that's why I brought it up because I
Yeah,
was,
but only you and
around
I
then.
remember it.
we did that then, so that's why.
Do you think people would still be interested in doing that?
I don't know, it's just putting flags out and all that sort of thing. That's the sort of thing it was. But
What we could do, of course, is the less difficult way for us to do this is to announce there will be a competition, put the rules, and put £100 first prize, £50 second prize, 25. Put money out there, and there will be people who will do that. And we've got the budget to do that because we won't be able to hire a marquee because there won't be any to hire. I mean, we could create a community prize fund for the best dressed house, and therefore we don't have to do a great deal apart from setting ground rules and then getting somebody esteemed like the chair to judge it, or I don't know, the high sheriff or whoever happens to be passing on that day.
Alan?
Yes, Alan. What? You'd be a great judge of the best dressed house. Anyhow, the point about it is I think Yvonne's idea is a good one.
Yes.
Create a prize fund, put together the rules or whatever, or the guidance, put it in.
It's a big promotion
Yeah,
of that shop.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Right, date and form of annual parish meeting. This is the meeting where the parish come along as opposed to the annual meeting of the parish council. 14th of March was a date being floated, which will be a Tuesday, I guess.
it's our meeting.
This is our meeting, yeah, you're right. So is everyone happy with that?
Except I'm going to be here.
You won't be here, okay. You can miss it.
Will we start
Zoom.
earlier?
Did you have a Zoom meeting?
Yes,
No, thank you.
I don't think we're going to make anything. We're not going to try and make a big meeting out of it because we have no idea how many people are going to come.
We won't get any idea.
Indeed. I'm with you, Alan. Right. Communicating with your community. This is one for Yvonne to brief us on from her training.
Right, yes. Building a two-way conversation with your community. It was done with Breakthrough Communications on Zoom. They came up with some various things, and I made a note of ones I thought we could possibly do. The first thing they were saying was encouraging the use of Facebook. Well, if you remember when we started our Facebook, we made it, it was John Rivers' suggestion, we made it just one way. So that I put stuff on there, but I don't get any of the aggro coming back. So it's a case of whether we think it's worth opening it up so that we get responses. That's one thought. They were also suggesting perhaps a live via Zoom question and answer session for half an hour on a regular basis. So, a bit like our parish council meeting, people can come along, but they don't. Would they more likely if it was once a month via Zoom? Just for half an hour. So it wouldn't take us
It would be
ages.
parish testimony.
Yes.
Except that it would be in public, it wouldn't be a private chat.
Yeah. So that was another suggestion. And then a survey, using the Survey Monkey thing that they use, but just concentrating on one thing, like just asking if you could change or improve just one thing in your local area, what would it be? So you could do a print one or digital, and they were talking about QR code as well. But that was something to get a response, to get an idea of what people want. And then the other thing was an e-newsletter, because we do get people saying, well, we don't know what's going on when we get the report, but that's a report of a meeting, that the chairman puts into Outlook. Obviously, we would have to sign up email-wise to do it. So those were the sorts of things that they talked about it.
And who are they?
This was, I sent it round to everybody. It's Breakthrough Communications that Calc use for these small things.
This Calc online training that they've begun to do.
But it was done, they don't use their own team, they have this Breakthrough Communications that they go and do them all over the place.
I think they are good ideas, possibly with the exception of Facebook, which I'm not very keen on.
Well, I don't have my own, but obviously I operate the parish council one. No? Yes?
Well, I think that this is what we do at the moment. We have a variety of means of communicating with parish councillors. Tonight is an example. We're not packed out clearly, but that is one of the things we do. You put your points of information on Nextdoor, and as a sort of per capita whatever in the village, we're one of the best penetrated Nextdoor communities in the country.
And people can reply to that as well, can't they?
Yeah, and by and large, it's we're kind of settled down a bit in some of the more contentious issues that were bubbling up, unlike places like Rye, for example, and the other end of Tenterden, which has got very political. But by and large, it's not bad. Then we've got the report in the Outlook. I think if people say they don't know what's going on, it's not for lack of us putting it out there. No one would have been prevented coming here. They could listen to the recording if they need about it. It's not beyond the realms of once we get a broadband in here, we could actually broadcast the parish council meeting. And a lot of parish councils do that. I'm chairing a trustee board tomorrow night. One of our trustees can't make it, so she'll be just joining on screen. It's not difficult to do. So I think we've actually got a number of good initiatives. What you've done there is remind us that the question, are we using them to the best advantage? How could we tweak certain things and what have you? But I think by and large we're doing a pretty good job. And for those very few that say, oh, we don't know what's going on in the parish council, I think that personally I think we should address that on a case by case basis. If Mrs. Watsit of Watsit Avenue has got a complaint, then we'll just sort of politely steer her towards what we've got already.
Like I do, I do get...
You do that, exactly, you know, so I think we're good. But I think the value of what you've been on is that it just reminds us, you know, what we do, and Facebook, yes, is often seen as a sort of a universal answer, but as Leslie, my Facebook part on social media is quite minimal. I just don't want to, you know, but I use Nextdoor far wider.
And also now you've started the parish desk again.
Mm.
Have people been actually asking you anything?
Well, at the last coffee morning there was only 11 people. Anyway, there were 13 the week time before. But then it didn't get into Outlook.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because you know that I did put everything out, but
Yeah.
it didn't, none of it, apart from the spreadsheet got in.
Yeah.
So, so once...
But it's there,
perhaps,
isn't it?
No.
Another thing that's there.
Yes.
Okay, well,
So you're all happy with what?
thank you for
Very
coming
useful.
going to it.
Mm.
Okay, correspondence. The first one is the KCC public consultation on home to school and post-16 transport for mainstream and special education needs pupils. I have glanced at that huge document
Yes.
online just to look for the issue about how they choose who they will put on a free bus. And one part of it I read twice or three times and could not understand, but by and large they have put into the policy what that they're already applying, which was that they can work out which is the closest school on a completely fictitious basis, and then having decided which is closest, look at how far it really is, and even if it's no longer the closest, they say it's still the closest because we already decided. That is in the policy, they're going to carry on with that. I don't think there's any point, frankly, in having another pop at it. You know, I wasted many hours on it before. I think it's awful, but...
It's got to run the course.
And interestingly, what are we seeing now at Homewood? We're seeing the beginnings of real grief.
Yeah.
There's going to be fights there sooner or later.
Explain that a bit more.
Oh, Homewood is completely blocked up now with a mixture of parking and traffic and everything because people are taking children to school in their cars. And that will apply from here. They won't all pay for the money for the bus. They'll say, well, I'll drive them up there then, or whatever, even though it costs the money. Homewood is now too big for its site, really. Sorry, it's too big for the road. And not, I mean, if you ever go and see...
It's the biggest school in the county, isn't it?
Huge, one of the big ones in the country. And you see the queue of buses. I mean, the other day, I'm not sure if the third one came from Homewood, but there were 3 buses came through the village in close succession. 2 from Homewood for sure. 1 may have been Ashford.
Yes, one would have been going to the Nats or
The idea that has been mooted is to build an access point where people can drive into the school around and drop off. But all that, they've got to get along the road to get to that point. And they get out of it.
Get stuck.
Get out of it again.
Yeah.
You know,
they built their own problem, basically.
That's right.
And just down the road, Asda are trying to build on the playing field as well.
And as for climate change and all the rest of it, well, I'm afraid they are just fingers in ears. Anyway, so that's that consultation. The thank you that
So
you
no
got
action
from the council. No, I don't think so. Thank you. The first aid training, the head teacher got on to you and said they were very pleased. And I think you sent us a picture or something.
Yeah, but I sent his email.
That's it.
Photos that he'd sent us. Yes, he did seem to be very grateful.
It's a good letter.
It was nice. The email from Matthew Taylor regarding parking in Lloyd's Green. I don't know if you all saw this.
Yes.
I thought it was a really rather strange reply from Ashford, which said, You sent it to the wrong person. I will now tell you all the reasons why you can't have any parking without actually passing it on to the right person.
That's right. It was. It seemed so strange, you know.
Yes. Bizarre.
Totally.
Anyway, I don't think there's anything for us to do other than that Matthew Taylor might get onto somebody else or write back or whatever.
I have said I'll put it on the agenda, so I shall have to go back to him and
You're
tell
right.
him what.
Doesn't that come under the same umbrella as the previous conversation with Mick?
It's the same person.
Yeah, yes, but I'm saying...
That's the trouble.
But we widened the context in our advice back to Mick that says that Ashford should look at this in the wider and the longer term. And then to Matthew Taylor, that's...
So that we passed this.
So we've done, our advice has been to our district councillor that Ashford need to look at this in a broader context of the parking situation in the village and suggest to them they canvass or survey everybody's needs in those areas. And I think Kate's point about saying, you know, I mean, you can't build a new house these days without an electric charging point. So what are the plans for the where council-owned properties are? What are the future? When are they going to put the electric charging points in? Right, and don't know is not really an acceptable answer. Even if they kick it into the long grass of 5 years down. You know.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Working party reports. Caretaker?
Nothing
Nothing
really,
new.
no.
Finance, you sent through the
Yes.
2 monthly statements, which we've all had a look at. Did anyone have any concerns about that?
No, it's been a bit odd. I think I got the 11th instead of the 12th. However, what I would just like to point out that last month, if you remember, I hadn't reconciled because I hadn't got the last statement. So when it came in, I obviously could put the right date in, but also we'd had the Whaley rent from UK Power Networks, so that went in last month as well. So I've actually produced an amended one for last month, which you haven't got.
Oh,
Just add 0. So the balance
Yeah.
won't be the same.
That's right.
If you happen to have last month's, you'll find that it's £44.34 out, because that's what we had for that. So that will go in, and then you've got the new months, and you will see that we've had money in from Canardington and Warehorn, £550 each, and we've also had the contribution from Ashford,
Yes.
of the scheme as well. Otherwise, much of a muchness.
Everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Now we've had the one off the computer for the 9 months to December. Interestingly, when it comes off the computer, it doesn't say what date it is at all.
No,
It didn't.
no, it's just
the big variance on the caretaker scheme has been unwound because it came in January. The numbers just, you've told me this before, Eva, I understood you rightly. The variances that we're showing, are they variances against the full year budget or the 9 months?
Yes,
Against the
yeah.
full year, okay. Yeah, good. So, I don't think it shows up anything alarming. There are amounts that we had, which we have not spent. This one reserves I didn't quite understand, and there's something up here, the contingency fund. They're movements you've made within the accounts. Is everyone happy with the 9 months report?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Those are looking good.
Gone.
Have I been doing
What's
one
new
or two
tablets?
on the others?
No, one of the effects at the moment is it gets a slight tick.
Right, okay,
on the minimum
back to
support.
the agenda
Brian
then.
gets it.
Bit of activity.
Next thing is
Brian gets it.
the applications considered since the last meeting on planning. Yvonne has always updated us. The land adjacent to 16 or 17 Lloyd's Green, we've objected again. That all went in with the work we did after last time, didn't it?
Yes, and I have since looked, I went in today just to see what position. With that is Southern Water, who were the ones that were still objecting but have now commented on this one. And they apparently, we were talking about 15 metres, but they've now agreed to a 10 metre standoff. So hence you can now get it in. But they say that their other comments still stand.
So are they going to move the house now to be 10 metres away instead of 15?
It is 10 metres away. It's not 15 metres.
On that plan?
The second one, I presume, because they now agree.
I thought that the idea was that those curves were 15.
I don't know, I didn't go into it.
But it went through the brick wall.
Well, perhaps it's fine.
I thought it was 15.
10 metres is fine. They've
No, but if
happy
it's
with
10, they can move off because they're almost through the back fence anyway, the back hedge.
Perhaps they won't get another one then.
But we're continuing to object anyhow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've also got the Willow Tree Barn, the offices application to turn the barn into offices has been agreed.
They're agreed, yes.
Yeah. And the anchor barn, the condition was removed.
Yeah, but that was already there. Willow Tree.
Okay, open spaces.
Still open? That's something.
Highways, someone was agitating with me about the parking at the sports club on Saturdays,
Yes.
where they do urge people to go and park in the village hall, but they don't. And someone was telling me that it was really quite dangerous on Saturday, where if you started to go down Poplar Road, you were on the wrong, depending which way you were going, you were in the one-way system for so far, you know, and nowhere to pull in because anywhere to pull in has got a car parked in it.
Interestingly, Brian commented on it quite independently. I mean, I didn't bring it up, but he said, oh, gee, it's a terrible mess.
I tried to go through it, eventually I did, and the way that people were just sort of diving into spaces in their cars, the last time I saw that was the panic about parking at Canberra on the sort of bank holiday time. It's that mentality. It's people in their cars, they're completely oblivious to what they're doing. You know, they've got to get little what's it out of the car in time for kick-off. I think that we need to, enough people have now commented on the problem, and I think that the Parish Council should write a letter reflecting that to the football club.
Yeah. Well, I think Paul will almost certainly know, that's Paul Wilkinson, he'll almost certainly know about it, and I'm sure he's doing as much as he can to encourage them to go to the village hall. I think they've just got to have a steward out there or something and say, oi. But
they did put a sign outside.
Yeah,
but by the time the cars are coming, you couldn't see the
on the fence, I know.
But it was in the street at the top on Saturday, and all around. But it's been like this for weeks and weeks and weeks.
The sports club.
And it was almost coming up to the houses where Barry's got his. And in which case you've got local ones parking there, and then you've got the shop, and then you've got the next.
The funny thing is that they're coming to run around on the football field, and it's not very far to walk up from the village hall.
No, so what we should
But
suggest in
all-
our letter to the
But not all village walk.
that they should cone off that strip.
Yeah.
Put the cones out
Yes.
before a match,
Yeah.
take them away after the match.
It's great. There's so many kids want to be involved, and parents being there.
And then
It's
you should
just-
be able to see the sign that says alternative parking is at the village hall, and give people a sign temporarily where it is.
Okay. So what we'd like to do is move on to
Common sense again.
Yes, not common sense.
Yeah.
Football club?
They want to get the nearest.
Yes.
one.
No, I think it's a big
club,
sports
isn't
club,
it?
because it's their premises and they'll have to take it on with you know who.
Oh.
I think it's a sports club.
Yeah.
Because it's the
Yeah.
sports club, as I say, there.
But the cone idea is excellent.
Well, that's up to them really how to try and fix
At times,
We're
so,
pushing
you know,
them to do it.
it's not easy for people getting out from the estate. It really isn't.
I understand.
Can't we suggest it?
I think we should suggest the code.
Okay, if you want to.
Put it down.
All right.
Preferably up to the triangle.
Yeah.
Because they're parking really right up on the back bend. It's so
On bend.
dangerous. Mm.
Okay, obviously the people will do what they like, which will be to ignore the cones, but at least we'll start trying to establish that. I think probably, I mean, if they have a steward out there, they'll only get bad temper, but they'll have to try and cope with that.
I mean, the reality of it is the car park which is available within the sports field is full as well.
Of course.
That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, of course, of course, of course.
Put them on
Right.
the football field.
POOWs, we talked about this before. Cuckoo Cottage, I gather, is up for sale. I think everyone knows that.
Yes.
See what happens.
Hmm.
Cemetery churchyard.
Can I just,
Go
sorry
on.
Jeremy, may I interject? As I mentioned the other day, I would like it on the record for the meeting. Antonia Lewis contacted me to say that they were restricting access to College Wood from Buds Lane.
Oh yes, you do.
But they are keeping the designated right of way open, and they do intend to sign it. But they're trying to discourage people from just wandering willy-nilly.
Which end are you saying they keep
Buds Lane.
Buds Lane.
I thought that's the one they were closing.
They're not closing anything. It's the access to the wood
From Buds
from
Lane.
Buds Lane. You can go across a meadow where there's 4 gates at the moment, and it's their field. Although Piper has
So,
access.
but there is, that's where the footpath goes.
Yes.
Across.
Yeah. So what they want to do is to encourage people to use that footpath.
Use the
only.
field rather than going by their new shed.
Yeah, use the designated.
Right.
And I suggested to her that the best way to let people know, I did say I'd bring it up, but the best way to let people know, because a lot of people use that, would be just to do a very simple explanation. She's done a map, and if she did that, I'd get it into Outlook for her.
Good.
That was
And that lady who you've been talking to, that is Ray Flucas's wife.
Why?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Cemetery churchyard.
Is there any more movement on the new cemetery? Anything? No?
Not actually as much as movement, no. But imminent. Imminent. It's definitely imminent. Date of next parish council meeting, the 14th of March. Date of an annual meeting of the parish council to be decided. That's where we have to have our first meeting and do this, that and the other. It's after the election. When I say we, it depends who's elected, of course. And there is some fuss going on in Calc as to when the earliest date allowable is, because the extra bank holiday for the coronation puts the cat among the pigeons a bit, and there are different legal views as to whether it can be on the Wednesday or about the 10th of May, I think. But anyway, Yvonne has suggested that since we always meet on Tuesdays, we couldn't meet on a Tuesday, that's too early. The 16th of May makes sense. So we have our parish, our normal date will be a week late.
Okay.
I have asked Sam, but she hasn't come back to me yet to make sure that
The hall is available. So that is our putative date.
Is that for the normal
Yeah.
parish council meeting and the
2 for 1.
2 for 1?
no,
No, it's
No.
just that it's a parish council meeting,
it's the annual.
but it's the annual meeting of the parish council,
Yes.
which
Well,
you
I'm saying-
mustn't mix up with the annual parish
No.
meeting.
No,
It's
just-
not
that's not what I'm
the same
saying.
date.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Yes,
So it's
we're
only one
moving
meeting.
the
Only one meeting.
we're moving the monthly parish council meeting,
To
By
six-
a week.
and we're also going to have the annual meeting.
Yeah.
No,
No.
There's
in March.
That
No,
March,
that's,
March the
no.
14th.
It's the
Yeah.
annual meeting of the parish council.
Which
Yes,
is when we
that's what I just said.
vote for a chairman, but it's not and, it's just
It's
one
only
meeting.
one meeting. It's
There's no and.
it's
So there's a normal parish council meeting,
But it's
there's
the
the annual one.
Yes.
Well, that's right. It seems
I want to keep
bizarre,
that bottle of
but
wine.
the annual meeting of the parish council is legally.
Picked up on the mic.
I will be clear and explain. The annual meeting of the parish council is legally distinct. And it's the first one of the year, and it has to be held within a certain period.
And there are other elections this year?
Yes.
Yes.
And what means?
Fourth of
Getting into the
fourth of
season.
May's
We should
election,
discuss it
you will
next
be
week.
able to fill in a form
Yeah.
and get two proposers, a proposer and a second, to nominate you to stand again.
Well, I just maybe I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all
No,
right.
that hasn't been in, that's got
It will
nothing to do
apply.
with this.
It will apply to us and to Ashford, but not Kent. They're 2 years apart.
So this annual meeting, if you don't decide, or if you get voted out, not enough people vote for you, you won't be coming to this meeting.
No.
Let's take that offline.
So you're yes, okay, fine.
All right, let's move on.
Right, we're now on items for information. Does anyone have information items? Alan? Sue?
No.
Colin?
No,
Leslie? Paul?
No.
My only tiny one is to say that we had the executive meeting of CALP on Saturday, the 28th of January. I won't tell you all about what happened there. There were some frustrations.
hallelujah.
Unusual. And now the last item on the agenda is to resolve by the nature of the sensitivity of the next item to exclude the public, which is to consider nominations for the CALP Community Award. If we want to do that, I need a proposer and a seconder.
Yeah.
Sue and Leslie, everyone happy with that?
Yes.
Right, this is a format we have to go through because you can sit in a parish council meeting unless we go into closed session. And we have to resolve to do it.
Just close your ears.
Nice to see you, Simon.
Nice to see you,
I don't
Simon.
compromise you at all.
Get it.
Right. Good night.